Good afternoon. We're going to start this meeting at 4:32 p.m. on Monday, June 3rd. It's a Monday, and it's the first Monday of June. I'd like to call to this special meeting for Monday, June 3rd, to start our budget study session 1 hour earlier in order to give us all the needed time to have a fruitful discussion on the budget. When it comes time for the regularly posted study session to start at 5:30, we'll pause and convene the meeting, but otherwise continue with our budget discussions. For the record, the time is 4:33 p.m. Mr. Domer, roll call, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Crosby.
Here, nice voice.
Budget study session. Councilmember Kashapagita will be a little bit late. Councilmember Lau. Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Present.
Mayor Hepburn.
Sure.
Perfect.
Where's your parrot? Oh, never mind. The city council meeting in a special study session for the following to allow staff present a budget overview, the proposed operating budget and capital improvement plan for fiscal year 2024-25. Mr. Domer, please start the study session.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to call up Finance Director Christy Lopez to begin this study session.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Mayor and City Council. Today we are presenting a balanced budget. I would first like to thank the finance staff who is apparently still working on the budget, so they're not here yet, who worked day and night to prepare the proposed budget document and this presentation. Their professionalism and dedication is appreciated, and this is truly a team effort. I would also like to thank my fellow department heads and their staff for their patience, assistance, and hard work in helping us analyze and prepare their budgets. The past 6 months, there has been a large increase in the number of individuals working on the budget, which has provided us with the opportunity to improve on current practices and see the budget through the eyes of many who have never worked on a budget before. This collaborative effort will be the key to the current and future financial success of the organization.
But in this interlude, I do want to use my raspy voice to thank the finance staff and Director Lopez. They have been working on Fridays and weekends, and a lot of other departmental staff as well, going over the budget. As the theme for this budget will be, the next 10 years are going to be tight. And this is just the first start of it. There's been some comments about a puzzle and puzzle pieces. I wore my puzzle piece socks to go along with that theme. I'm not going to show anybody right now, but this is just the first step as we go these next many years to make sure that we survive the next 10 years. And so there's going to be iterations during the year. This is not just a one and done, and then we'll see you again next June. This is going to be where staff at every level is focusing on the budget and our priorities and how we go about things, because it is getting exceedingly difficult to be what I call a thin city. We're a full service city for a small population with not the best in overall revenue base, but we make do and we deliver great services. And that's to the credit of the city council and to the credit of the recent city councils that have made some decisions that have helped us put us on the right path since changing some of the standards to employee health benefits, to, retiree medical benefits, and those things that are some of those costs that once put in are difficult to keep up with because the operational costs keep on increasing. The revenues aren't increasing as fast as possible. And so we're really bringing forward a budget that is balanced. There's some use of unassigned fund balances to help us get there. And that's why we need to be very cautious over the next year and bring to you all the information that you guys need to make the best decisions to keep things going. So with that, I think she has the clicker and she can take us through the presentation.
So you were all provided with a budget last week, which at the time was the most current but at that time, we had over a $1.7 million deficit at, and that has changed, fortunately, due to changes in both revenues and expenditures. So if you have seen something in the budget document that you like or something you don't like, or you want additional information, we have not completed the budget document preparation. That is just the proposed budget, so we can include anything that you may want to be changed. So this is an outline of what we're going to review today. So we will have the overview of the budget, and then the departments will go into their individual sections. And then which will include CIP and capital outlay. And then we will have a follow-up at the end of the meeting. Some of the highlights: staff is proposing a balanced budget for fiscal year 24-25 of $48.9 million, using $1.18 million of an assigned fund balance. The assigned fund balance is not part of the reserves. It is basically the money from prior years that we have saved up. The budget does follow the city manager's direction of aligning budget expenses to prior year levels, which has really been with the departments to go through all of their expenditures and make sure that everything is in line and detailed out. We do have a small amount of Measure LV that has been appropriated for capital outlay. It's $143,000, which is close to what was appropriated in this fiscal year. And then our unfunded operational and capital outlay total is $956,000. That amount is the amount that we had come to once the department said, this is what I want. This does exclude personnel, but the departments presented what their requests were, and then the city manager went through and directed the departments to cut. So that is the amount that was cut off already. General fund is, as we know, the biggest fund that we have, and is the most city council can decide how they want to expend those funds. So excluding the use of assigned fund balance and one-time funds, the general fund had a 5% decrease in revenues compared to the prior year. 4% or $600,000, or the increase in property tax was 4% or $600,000. There was a 2% increase in sales tax, which equated to $100,000. There is a 9% increase in recreation fees, which are tied to the direct cost increases of personnel to run the class. There was a 1.8% decrease in building permits, and the amount of the decrease is $250,000, generally less than what we had left overall. Decrease. Yes, 0.5%. The general fund expenditures, one of the largest changes is the UAL. The UAL last year, which is the unfunded accrued liability, was $10,000. That was the amount that we had to pay. That's not our total liability, but that's the amount we had to pay. That's our bill. The bill this year for 24-25 is going to be $860,000. That is a 7,000% increase. It's a huge increase. Yes. So it's a pretty impactful amount. Next year, we are seeing that increase is going to be even larger. They're anticipating that that's going to be about 1.4 next year. The salary increases were 5.8%, with the benefit increases of about 1.7%. And then helpers normal cost, we did have a decrease that was mostly due to the cost share by the classic members in the unrepresented management, executive management, police officers association, police mid-management, and the city, Laverne City Employees Association. So the changes that Ken has implemented during negotiations have had an impact, and that is going to, continue through the years. And we hope that we can get all of the bargaining units on board with that. 63% of the general fund revenues are expended on public safety, which equates to over 30 million or 63 cents out of each general fund dollar. So it is a very large amount, but it's also what residents and council have identified as a very important service. This is a really high-level chart which shows the change in operational expenditures by department. The 22-23 figure is, those are actuals, and then 23-24, that's our estimated year end. So as long as all the departments are on target with their year-end estimates, then that amount will stay. The 24-25 is the proposed budget. So I'm sorry. That's okay. It's operational. So our operational is very minor. It's our audit, it's required stuff that we have to have. Our people cost the most, right?
Yeah, and that's a very good point because again, personnel is the most expensive. And you see Public Works leads in the operational, but it's kind of misleading. It's because Public Works does a lot of operational issues, everything from the piping and the asphalting and the street and the contracting and all that stuff. So that's where it sees more costs there, but it is misleading because it's not the leading expenditure of all city departments, but they have a big bang out there. So,
and also in that operational number is waste management contract. So that is a pass through. Basically, we have the expenses, but then we pay for it. So that is included in there as well. That's a very large figure. The general fund balances. So I added a section where we could see what the reserves are. So you can see the oranged out areas or the boxes. Those are the reserves. So we have a requirement of 20%, 15% for the emergency contingency, and 5% for working capital. Those amounts are figured based on the proposed budget. So that amount did increase over last year. We added about $600,000 in reserves due to the increase in the expenditures. The amount that we are proposing to council to be used to balance the budget is that assigned balance down at the bottom. And this will be how the general fund balances look at the end of June 2025. And that is if council does propose to use the 1.1 million for the assigned fund balance. And what happens is that assigned fund balance is not a legal restriction. It is identified in our fund balance policy that the city manager can identify how those funds need to be assigned. So what Ken did is he looked at what our benefit obligations were, which are the sick and vacation leave amounts that we have for liability. In the past, we had identified the remaining amount all went to the benefit obligations, which was based on in the event that every employee left, we would be able to pay them out. As Ken said, if that happened, we would have a bigger issue than this issue. So he went through and identified a different breakdown. So he has identified $500,000 to be set aside for workers' comp, 500 for capital projects, and then, well, the 500 for capital projects was already there, and then additional $250,000 for legal or litigation. That would leave at the end of fiscal year 24-25 the benefit obligation of 1.1. Our average payout each year is $800,000. So it would give us with a sufficient amount to pay for a single year. This is a fun chart that tells you about how the balances have changed over the years. So you can see again that orange box, that is the required amount that we do have to set aside. So you can see it does increase as our expenditures increase, which has drastically increased over the past few years. So we do have other funds. Although we do focus on the general fund, there are others. This is the total, this is the pie chart that shows the total resources from all sources. General fund, of course, is the largest and most flexible source, while the others are restricted. The enterprise funds are the water and sewer funds. We have our fiduciary, which is LA HIDA. And then we have special programs, which is the majority of the other funds. And that's where we house our streets or gas tax, CDBG, Measure A, Prop C, all those other funds. And those are restricted. Here are the appropriations. This is a breakdown of all appropriations by type of service. So you can see the majority of the activity is the general operational activity of running the city, with the capital improvements taking the second place with 17%. We have a Measure LV update. Tier 1 expenditures, which are to cover the salary increases, has increased roughly about $800,000 from the prior fiscal year. That's to cover the salary increases. So that amount is 3.9, with the tier 2 of 143,000 being proposed. The estimated fund balance at the end of the year is 12.1. This was presented to Measure LV in May, right before the first study session that council had. And at that time, we were anticipating that the increases were 2.5% for unrepresented and CEA, and 3% for POA and policeman management, and then 3.5 for fire association. We have now gotten the final numbers for the fire association, which have come in higher than we anticipated. So 6.5% will be the increase for firefighters and engineers, and then 6% for captains. So at the time that we presented this figure to Measure LV, that did not include those numbers. And so prior to this meeting, I did send them an update just to let them know that that figure had come in, and we do have solid numbers that we're using in the budget. Additionally, as you'll see in the capital outlay area, there were some original items included in the capital outlay list for Measure LV. And due to some shifting that we want to take care of some capital outlay with the savings that we are anticipating to have in the end of this fiscal year, as well as having a need for some of those items to be implemented right away, we're doing some shifting. So I also let them know that that was the case, as the recommendation by council or by staff is changing a little bit to what Measure LV has proposed. The enterprise fund reserve balances, you can see at the end that there's a drastic drop. The reason for that is there was a $4 million unfunded and benefit liability that is on the books for the enterprise funds. Enterprise funds are a business activity, and so they're different than a general fund or special revenue fund. So whereas the city doesn't have to include our $25 million unfunded liability on the books, the enterprise funds have to. And so that is partly what is eating into the fund balance. However, an additional piece of that is that for the past couple of years, the water fund revenues or the expenditures are exceeding the revenues. It is anticipated this year with this approved budget that the expenditures will exceed the revenue by $2.9 million, which is why that water study is going to be very important. The ARPA fund, or the ARPA money. So we have had some changes. If you remember recently, planning took the housing rehab back to council to identify to release those funds. So we have done some moving around, and we will be evaluating to make sure that the items that we have on here are still the priority. But currently what we have is some items that are still pending or in progress, which includes gender compliance, city hall carpet, which is on its way, which covered the difference of what CDBG did not cover, city hall roof, city yard improvements, financial system update, and public safety engineering plans, just to name a few. So this is the most recent updated information based on today's expenditure. We do have 22 current vacant positions, and what we've done, because we are in such a tight budget, each department went through those vacant positions with the city manager and finance and identified if there were any savings. So if we had a water maintenance person who we needed to hire, but we knew that we weren't going to finish recruitment for the first, until October, we would identify those savings. So that is also included in this budget, again, because we are so tight. We are looking for every possible penny we can. But there is an increase. Each of the departments will go through all of their personnel in more detail. This is a summary page. And with that, I think I'm going to give it to JR.
Well, JR is on the line. I'm going to start it off by saying, yes, this is the administrative portion of the item. And JR, just making sure you're online.
I'm here. Can you hear me okay? Hello?
Yes.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Oh, he's probably talking. All right, JR, can you hear us now?
I can hear you guys great.
Perfect. Okay. We can hear you now. So yes, members of council, members of the public, this is the administrative portion. This is the city manager's office, city council, city clerk, IT, HR. So, we don't have really any revenue coming in to us. So we are purely general funded, but I'm going to let Mr. JR, who is recuperating at home, to lead us through this time. So go ahead, JR.
Thank you, Ken. Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. Thank you to City Manager Domer and especially the finance staff for their assistance with this year's budget process. This year definitely marks a more challenging year for budgeting than in the past couple years. When facing this type of a challenge, there isn't typically one easy solution or single piece of the puzzle, but rather a need of several pieces to kind of come together. And with that in mind, administration has worked to share its pieces in providing the balanced budget. Beginning with the next slide. In general, budget requests for the coming year without significant changes from the previous. However, it is important to note that there have been reductions in areas as well as points worth noting for the public and the city council. One thing that's significant from last year's budget is it's a non-election year. So we don't have election for local races, and there's no significant budgetary requests included this year compared to the $200,000 that were budgeted last year. There continues to be increases in our IT related subscriptions, but we are using more efficient consultant services from the original proposal that was brought forward to the city council this past year. City council may remember approving a multi-year agreement contracting for IT services with SDI Presence. After initial implementation, our overall cost of that contract has actually been reduced significantly, resulting in technically a savings from what we originally thought the cost would be. While the overall cost of services are lower, the actual strength of our security and our services in IT have never been stronger. So it's been a really good relationship so far with SDI. Our subscription costs related to IT continues to increase each year, and this budget request include consideration of those anticipated increases. Those types of subscriptions are things like for Microsoft 365, the new HR platforms, those types of things. And then there also continues to be a significant recruitment burden being experienced across all departments. The city is looking to bring on a professional recruitment specialist within the next month who has the expertise in utilizing the full range of resources and tools that the city already has at its disposal, and then also implementing some new ones in the next couple months. The interviews, we're excited for that position, have been set for Monday the 10th. So hopefully we're able to identify a top candidate for that. And go ahead to the next slide. In reflection of a tighter budget and recent retirements, the city manager's office is significantly reducing personnel costs. This is in the form of reducing a previous full-time administrative support position to an entry-level part-time position. We are also using the word unfunding may not be the perfect word, but a previously budgeted information system support position and leading further on our contract with SDI for day-to-day support. However, the long-term plan is to reinstitute the information systems position with next year's budget, as that is the sustainable model that's been identified moving forward and needed to support the city's various services. And then mention this a little bit, and it's also noted on the slide. We are looking to enhance our personnel support platforms with the recent personnel changes that we've had and reviewing opportunities for service enhancement and efficiencies. The city has initiated implementation of new employee onboarding and performance evaluation software. These tools will greatly reduce some work burdens that we have on our internal staff, but also enhance our ability to internally serve our employees. Next slide. The city manager, as part of his careful and thorough review of each budget area, went through and targeted reductions identified to assist in this overall puzzle solving. So basically just looking at previous year's expenditures and kind of whittling down where we could. Next slide. It is important to note that while there are some reductions from last year, the proposed administration budget continues to include funding for employee recognition, training and wellness programs, such as the lunch and learns that assist in our employee development. And then we're taking greater opportunities with the JPIA and the free training that they offer on a regular basis. And then I think for my last slide, in relation to capital outlay needs, staff has completed a full device inventory with scheduled replacement, with basically a scheduled replacement calendar. And based on that assessment and guidance from our consultant, SDI, we will be utilizing identified savings from the current fiscal year to purchase approximately 35 computers across the various city buildings, including City Hall, Public Safety, City Yard. It is important to have up-to-date computers, obviously, that are within warranty for security of the city's IT infrastructure, as well as making sure that our employees have the tools that they need to perform their jobs. And with that, that is all that I have for the admin sections of the budget.
Hey, we're really glad to see you back. As far as you sound much better, so keep recovering at home and don't talk anymore.
Thanks. I do feel much better.
You sound better, but remember, just get even better. Thank you.
On part of the reductions here, I know it says community promotion under a couple of spots. Just because our community would ask, what are you not going to promote or use to promote for that?
Generally, community promotions, a lot of the, if we're at an event, have the pop-up tent, things like that, have little trinkets or something like that, pass outs and all that. It's not that we're reducing, to say we're looking at how we've been doing in the past. We did expand it overall last year to make sure that we're getting out and doing things differently. We're doing also a lot more on internet, social media, and getting information out that way, which is a little bit more efficient and less costly. So it's some of those items that we're looking at using technology. And I wanted to emphasize on the technology. And I know other departments will talk about use of technology. The police department will talk about use of technology, but JR mentioned it a little bit. Last 2 weeks ago, we had a seminar in here, Lunch and Learn, and there was probably 50 plus people from staff, employees, to learn from the chief's wife, who does this at the school district, but about the use of AI and how we can increase it, the use for the betterment and for the efficiency. And so it's a really good tool. So we're really looking at those informational technology issues to upgrade our ability to deliver services. And, JR mentioned about, we had an HR person who was spending probably 2 hours going over each onboarding within a new employee. And so when you imagine if you're onboarding 5 people, that's 10 hours in a week. If you're onboarding more. So now what we're doing is we're using an electronic platform. The new employee can do it from home, and it greatly reduces that time because we only have one HR person. And we don't have that person right now. So we have a consultant in here. So the use of technology in a city our size is so very beneficial. And those are some of the things. And then again, with the community promotion, just looking at some of the past costs, what we had expended, knowing that we increased it last year, and then saying that, okay, well, we could, use some of the technology or some of our knowledge from last year and reduce the costs, just trying to keep it within line.
Okay. Okay, that's okay. So tonight I will also be presenting the information in the finance budget. So the finance department budget is status quo with some minor fluctuations. We took on a study this year that we included with some savings that we had from a position that we didn't budget. So that is going to be gone. We are shifting a lot of our workflow to electronic platform. Our audits, whereas in previous years, they would come into the city and do the audit, and they would spend a week here, and we would give them the documentations and they would review them. We are now completely remote, and so we have to scan every single piece of documentation that the auditors want to see. So staff has done a really good job of shifting our journal entries, some of our other regular items that we do, to that electronic platform. That way, when it is time to provide those documents to the auditors, we have them ready and we don't have to scan them. The Government Accounting Standards Board is a entity that oversees all of the requirements that governments have to follow. They have 2 new pronouncements this year that we do have to implement. One of them is a requirement to include any accounting changes or error corrections within our ACFR or our financial report. We have to include that and just let them know if there were any changes. The second one is the one that's going to require a little more work. The compensated absences, they are requiring us to change the way that we value that. Compensated absences are your vacation and your sick leave liabilities that you have on the books for employees, and they are requiring us to look at more of a practical use, including when someone retires, how much are they going to use? So it's really just a financial requirement that we have to do, but it will be in the ACFR this year. But it does create additional work for staff. The increased activities related to negotiation and budget forecasting, as we are in a budget that is more difficult to balance. I agree with JR. This is the most difficult budget that I've had to do in the 12 years that I've been doing budgets. It is so tight that we are looking for every single dollar and cent that we can, which makes our job harder because we are double checking and triple checking and quadruple checking everything. Additionally, as shifting workflow to electronic platform, we are streamlining our financial reports to make it easier for departments to look at their activity throughout the month. We send out reports which detail all of their expenditures, including their budgets, so that they can identify those. And we are trying to change those from a PDF to a Excel platform so that people can easily identify it and sort it if they need to. Personnel requests. We had an inkling that the financial situation was going to be a little tough. And so instead of hiring our accountant, we did put a hold on that. And so that is the position change, is us not moving forward with that. And staff is again optimizing processes to try and make up for the fact that we didn't hire that position that we really did need. Our expenditures, as with other departments, Ken did go through and identify some cuts, but additionally, we were able to shift some of our expenditures over to the successor agency. Successor agency does require an audit. They do require financial review. And so we were able to shift some of those expenses over. We had not been utilizing the full $30,000 of admin expenditures. The second big piece to our budget is that we have to do an actuarial every 2 years, which looks at our retiree medical benefit as well as our UAL. And so this is the year where it's a large actuarial. So whereas normally it costs $2,500, this year it's $16,000. So this is every other year that we have to have this expense. This is a detail of the items that were reduced and or moved to the successor agency. So it was a minor amount, $12,000, but for our operational budget, it is a pretty large piece of it.
I can't help myself. I'm so sorry. You talked about reducing a person, but in the very beginning, you spoke about working on Fridays. I want to make sure that our people are compensated, that they're working on overtime, because if we are cutting a person, that doesn't just mean we put more work on our people. And I know you take care of them, but I just want to make it known and said out loud.
Thank you. And that concludes my presentation. If there's any questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Fire, you're up.
Good evening. Good to see you all.
Evening, Chief.
All righty. Let's see here. So Honorable Mayor, City Council members, and esteemed colleagues, let me first start by thanking the entire finance team for all of the back and forth and debate and working through all of these very, very confusing numbers. Most specifically, Senior Accountant Isabella Guzman, who was our direct fire liaison. Really appreciate everything. I'm here to present the Laverne Fire Department budget for the fiscal year 2024 to 2025 and to highlight the significant changes from the previous fiscal year. Our budget philosophy remains firmly rooted in data, community need, and comprehensive strategic planning, ensuring that we continue to provide the highest level of service to our community. And before I move on, please let me articulate that we definitely understood the assignment and realize that the city's in a tough position this year and tried our best to work through that. For the upcoming fiscal year, our proposed operational budget indicates a 5.4% increase in costs compared to last year's approved budget. This increase is primarily driven by three key factors. Number one, economic inflationary costs. Like many other departments, we face rising costs due to inflation, affecting everything from supplies to operational expenses. Number two, fleet replacement program. We are implementing a new fleet replacement program, ensuring our vehicles remain reliable and efficient. This proactive approach reduces the risk of service interruptions and costly repairs. And we'll talk a little bit about that later on, a little bit more about that later on, as will Public Works. Three, LA Regional Communications Interoperability Subscription. This mandatory subscription ensures seamless communication across regional emergency services, which is crucial for our coordinated responses to emergencies. This is a mandatory subscription that we must take part in due to our service agreement with LA County Fire for emergency communications services. And finally, and unrelated to operations, but overall relevant, it is important to note that personnel costs have also increased by 4.4%, as approved in the current LVFA Labor Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU. Increases necessary to maintain competitive salaries and benefits, which are crucial for retaining and attracting skilled firefighters, overall contributing to the broader 4% increase of the fire department's holistic budget. Lastly, I'd like to point out on this slide our cost recovery efforts. I'm pleased to report that our cost recovery efforts have been effective, with an anticipated revenue peak at historical highs of $1.8 million, reflecting a 12% return on investment. This revenue helps offset costs, some of our increased operational costs, and demonstrates our commitment to fiscal responsibility. Turning to operational staffing needs, in the July 2022 Community Risk Assessment and Standards of Cover for the Verne Fire Department, several trigger points regarding the need for increased firefighter staffing were highlighted. Key findings and recommendations included: number one, growth and development impacts. As the city expands, particularly with projects like the Gold Line and Old Town Specific Plan, there will be increased risks and demands on services. This necessitates additional first response resources to address potential multi-story or multi-family structures that are more complex and require more personnel for effective response. We are seeing these developments being presented now. Number two, the current staffing levels effectively handle current and recent past calls for service levels. However, the approximate additional 800 to 1,000 calls for service experienced in calendar year 2023 forces us to analyze our current deployment for efficiency and practicality. Number three, recommendations suggested the imminent need to add a staffed engine company at Fire Station 1 within the next 5 years to improve response capabilities, meet national safety standards, and meet future growth and associated risks. The initial cost projections for an additional staffed engine company were calculated to be approximately $1.6 million. However, to manage costs more effectively, I've proposed a paramedic squad plan by simply hiring 3 additional firefighters, reducing the fiscal impact to the general fund by 72% compared to adding a fully staffed engine company. This plan further ensures we meet NFPA 1710 standards on all complex, all-risk responses, reduces wear and tear on our extremely high-value equipment, $2 million ladder truck, and further ensures resource availability even with the increased call volume that I just spoke of. That would indicate the 3 additional firefighters that are on the bottom of the slide there that we brought forth for consideration this fiscal year. Lastly, on this slide, I'd like to point out the 6 part-time positions that are indicated here that we'd be moving forward with those positions. Those are the only part-time positions we have in the fire department. And if you'll recall, they staff the alternative response unit that is a part of our San Gabriel Valley care team that addresses mental health crisis out in our community. At this point, we are working through alternative funding mechanisms to keep that in service. However, at this point, my conversations with the city manager and finance have indicated that we may need to cease operations of that program after July 1st if we can't secure that additional funding.
Isn't that more of a county program where the county was supposed to be funding that, not just us?
It's a lot more complex than that. It's actually a collaboration between multiple agencies, primarily the San Gabriel Valley COG, the Licata, LA County Licata team, as well as community services, the police department. And then our component of that was just providing effective transportation or alternative to police transport or private ambulance transport to these mental health facilities.
Chief, question, how many hours would you say you've saved law enforcement officers from going and transporting and doing that to go to the hospital? Because I know if it takes two officers, maybe sometimes go
Sure.
transport somebody, sit at the hospital or whatever the case might be, 6, 10 hours. How many hours would you say you've saved
Well,
other
let me
agencies?
Yeah, let me quantify it in this respect. I brought that idea forward because well over 20 years ago when I was working private ambulance, we would show up on these scene calls and there'd be a police officer or somebody with a 5150 hold waiting for us to then transport somebody to a specialized facility. The intent by bringing this idea forward was to save law enforcement that time, keep those law enforcement resources within the city, provide a mobile workspace, if you will, for the team that's out there doing this in the elements. But then also provide a dignified way to provide these individuals with care, right? As opposed to going in a police car or something of that fashion. I couldn't quantify for that in hours for you. However, I do know that at the numbers I just provided to the mayor recently, the SGV care teams responded to upwards of 90 plus calls thus far since its deployment in December of 23. And we've transported somewhere between 22 and 25. And those transports have gone all the way out to Torrance, up to the high desert area. So it's quite far. So the hours are extraordinary, I'm sure.
We're also working with the COG to try to compensate for that because they have a network and, so that is a very serious thing that we're working with them along with the city manager. And it's working extremely well, but it is costly.
Yeah, and it's a good example of some of the regional partnerships that we're trying to forge for some of these issues that aren't entirely our own, but we can provide some resources and hopefully a lot of push to get the county and the county partners to, move along on these efficiencies and partnerships.
And the initial discussion was really good. The intent, or everybody understood going into this, everybody that's a part of this program understood that it was a pilot program in this form. And so beyond that, there was going to have to be a lot more conversation about long-term sustainable funding. And here we are, because we are seeing the data and the effectiveness of all the pieces that go into that. Okay, going on to our expenditure summary. So in light of careful assessment, our initial overall operational budget request of $2,280,851 was a 5.4% increase from fiscal year 23-24. The increase was due to a lack of historical heavy apparatus replacement allocation. Public Works policy change was to incorporate a new annual fleet assessment contribution. That cost was included in this year's original request. However, the city manager altered course and further changes included a new vehicle leasing philosophy. In that philosophy, instead of outright purchasing, the philosophy moving forward will be take advantage of lease-to-own programs for the high-value heavy fire apparatus. So what I mean by that is fire engines, ladder trucks, those things that cost us $1 million or $2 million every time we go to purchase them. As a result, the city manager adjusted our operational budget, which now reflects as $1,955,571. This decision spreads out the financial burden, making our expenditure more predictable and manageable. And finally, our unfunded requests. While we strive to meet all operational needs, we also realize some requests remain unfunded because of the city's financial position. However, I'd like to highlight a few that I believe to be of particular concern. At the city manager's discretion, reduce requests for department recognition awards, computer hardware, tools, and subscriptions to streamline our budget further, resulting impacts being difficulties in honoring above and beyond services such as life-saving, valor, and commendation awards, and inability to replace or repair large and small tools which are lost or damaged during the course of our duties. And lastly, training and community risk reduction subscriptions reduced by 40% from last year, impacting our ability to fund essential industry membership and training programs which keep us relevant, educated, and connected to modern day activities. And there's our last slide. In conclusion, the proposed budget reflects our commitment to providing excellent fire and emergency services to our community. We have made strategic adjustments to balance physical responsibility with the need to enhance our department's capabilities. I urge the council to support these changes and support the proposed budget to ensure the continued safety and well-being of our community. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions real quick? Yes.
I can't go. There were a lot of additions done in the last couple of years that were stated to be funded by those people's actions, business permits and fire safety and stuff like that. And I know I probably don't have it now, but I would like to make sure that where are we with that? Are they coming to fruition of what was promised? Because a lot of times when we add things and say it's going to be funded by something in the future, sometimes that doesn't all come through or not. And so that was just my big wonderment in all this as well. Just because I know things cost, and but if things were promised to be coming through to help pay for it, if that's happening or not.
Yeah, without having the direct numbers right in front of me from the previous years, as I mentioned, I think in the first slide, we this year we will see an all-time high in our revenues, 1.8 million. When I got here, speaking very high altitude, we were anywhere from 700,000 to 800,000 maybe in revenue. So we have exponentially increased our revenues in the fire department. And you know, everything that I told you guys would come to fruition, I believe has come to fruition. And that's why we're in this space. Like I said, I very much believe that it's important for us to provide a good value and a return on investment on how much you spend on your fire department.
And I think our fire department's doing very well. It's just always when we add new things, and just always try to evaluate our programs and make sure that we are doing things as efficiently as we can.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it. Hello, Chief.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council members, fellow city staff. I'm here to propose the Police Department's 24-25 annual budget. But before doing so, I'd also like to extend my gratitude to Christy and her staff, especially Jesus and Ellie, who I don't know why, but maybe police got two because we're so complicated. But the two of them really put up with every question that we had all season long. Excuse me. I'd also like to thank my own staff for helping me assemble this, to include Don Finn, Captain Prouse, who's got a bum arm today, but he also helped. So as well as my lieutenants, Lieutenant Leeper, Lieutenant Wells, and Lieutenant Drunsfeld. I'd be remiss if I didn't include Holly, Rebecca, and Justine. And as Christy mentioned, the more hands in it, the more eyes in it. We were tasked with trying to reduce costs wherever we can. So those are all the folks that had the eyes on it. The proposed budget before you reflects a service-driven approach. The department has worked closely with the city manager and finance to ensure the requests remain physically conservative while striving to maintain or enhance public safety services. We're not known as a revenue generating source, but we did our best at trying to maintain the level of service or enhancing it by some way or another, which I'll explain further. I'd like to begin by sharing some highlights as seen on this screen here. As you'll see, the 24-25 budget indicates a 6.4% increase in personnel cost. Those increases are attributed to, as some of my counterparts have said, is an increase in benefits and in pay, as well as in overtime due to some of the vacancies that I still face challenges with. We also see a 5.6% increase in operating costs compared to 2023-2024 adjusted budget. The increase, again, is primarily driven by economic inflation, as well as the standards and training that we have to meet, which include post standards and the cost of sending folks out, the training, hotel costs, mileage, all that has also increased. And before I continue to the next slide, I want to bring up our very last council meeting where Matrix was here to present a study. His name was Richard Brady, if you recall. Matrix provided a staffing and space study, which comparatively reviewed all of our staffing levels, the level of efficiency, the way we operated day in and day out, as well as the building. So this year's budget, knowing that this year's budget was formulated to do that and take incremental steps to achieving that success. The study, like I mentioned, the study analyzed our administrative section, and I have expressed the challenges with the city manager, and he agrees that we need to enhance our staffing to improve efficiency in our administrative operations. Having a sound administration moving forward is a very important aspect and must be made in small incremental changes moving forward. Here, I'll provide you a summary of personnel. Again, the matrix study found that several positions within the administration were performing a large number of tasks individually, thus necessitating the need to increase or upgrade positions, as indicated here in the slide. Here, we seek to increase personnel by 3 positions, and I'll go over those briefly. As you can see in position number 1, the first addition is a community services officer. If you recall that this position was once held by Holly Savage, those duties remained with her. However, she also inherited several other supervisory roles while continuing that. That without having an additional CSO to assist her in some of her functions. As you also know, she also runs not only the city's social media, but the police department's social media, and assists other members in doing so. So we've essentially doubled, if not tripled, her workload for one person. Although she is being compensated for that, it's still overburdensome, and we seek to reduce that by adding a community services officer that would help her, and which she will oversee and she will supervise. The second there is a police lieutenant. Before I continue, it's important that I provide you a bit of a historical preview of where we were and where we are now, necessitating the additional lieutenant.
Chief, I'm going to hold you right there. We have to adjourn this meeting, then we're going to start right back up again.
Yeah.
We're not adjourning. We're just adjourning it because it was supposed to a special session because we were supposed to be,
You're going to stay right there.
you're going to stay right there. Hold
Don't
your,
move.
hold your thing. So we're going to adjourn the special meeting and reconvene the regular meeting. City manager will make sure this happens, which you just did. So thank you all. For those who are joining us, we started our budget session at 4:30 p.m. during a special meeting, which have just adjourned, but you're now going to continue after the formalities, starting the regular session as 5:30 p.m. Mr. City Manager, call roll call.
Thank you, Councilmember Crosby,
Here.
Councilmember Casafiguita,
Here, sir.
Councilmember Lau, Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Present.
Mayor Hepburn.
Present.
All present. We can continue, sir.
Chief, you have the floor.
Thank you. Sure. As I mentioned,
Start off with
for this next position, I think it's important for me to explain or provide you with a historical perspective of where we were and where we are now, and the need for this position. We over 10 years ago, just over 10 years ago, we operated with 5 lieutenants. 4 lieutenants oversaw patrol functions, 2 on the one side of the week, which covered the days and nights, and 2 covered the other side of the week, which covered days and nights, Sunday through Tuesday, and then Thursday through Sunday. Or I'm sorry, through Saturday. And then while the 5th lieutenant oversaw our investigative division. Aside from their roles as managers, each lieutenant are also responsible for many ancillary duties and responsibilities. Many of those responsibilities have increased due to state and federal mandates requiring additional oversight to maintain compliance. Since then, the department has decreased staffing in the lieutenant rank by 1. The lieutenant roles have shifted with only having 2 lieutenants overseeing patrol functions. The investigative lieutenant was also shifted into an administrative role where a second captain oversaw support services division is now run by an administrative lieutenant. Prior to having 5 lieutenants, the lieutenants oversaw 6 to 8 ancillary duties or responsibilities. The 4 lieutenants that we have currently working at the station now have 12 to 14 ancillary responsibilities, posing several operational challenges, which include the lack of efficiency. The 5th lieutenant, as we all know, is assigned to LA Impact. The department sought to bring him back and place him in investigations. However, in doing so, would be outside the city's agreement with LA Impact, which requires a department member to be part of the team to meet our fiduciary requirements. It's also important to note that over the last 2 years, the department has received in a service fee $150,000 for having a lieutenant at LA Impact. In this past April, the department requested the amount to be increased to $350,000 before the LA Impact's executive committee, which I sit on as well. The committee unanimously agreed to begin paying the $350,000 this upcoming fiscal year. I've been working with the city manager and finance that if the addition is approved, we could see a promotion as soon as January. The reason why it's that soon, or it's going to take us a while, because we have 6 vacancies in patrol. As I shift patrol members, my goal is to reduce overtime, not increase it. And doing so too quickly, it would create a problem where we're trying to save money, not spend additional. The additional lieutenant would enhance operational effectiveness in the Bureau, adding oversight and the ability to redistribute ancillary duties to all lieutenants fairly and efficiently. As I move on, we look to upgrade a position. The third position is a support services manager. We intend to upgrade the communication supervisor position to have more of a civilian manager role. This position would also alleviate some of the duties held by a lieutenant who oversee records and communications bureau and community services. The formation of a support services manager is not new to the organization. We once supported such a role within the organization. This position was also removed about 10 years ago. The support services manager would oversee almost all professional staff and our volunteer and youth programs. Again, those positions are now overseen by lieutenants. This would reduce some of the load on them as well. Fourth position you see here is an administrative clerk. Each of these positions have all been emphasized also in the matrix study. For this position, the matrix study found the department's management analyst, which is Don Finn's position, who was also performing a large number of tasks for one sole person. The report recommends, and I agree with the report, that help in that office would improve the overall efficiency and would also take some strain off the sergeants and lieutenant by realigning some of their responsibilities. Essentially saying that the current management analyst position is just carrying way too much for one person. The 4 recommendations aim to improve efficiency and the overall well-being of each employee. Here I'll provide you a summary of our expenditures. The first one in operations, there was a minor change there done by city manager. We went from 2.4 million, 2.432 to 2.427 with a reduction of 5,300, which I'll cover in an upcoming slide. Moving forward in operational costs, we had asked for $206,000, which we had also made some changes to, and I will also discuss that in the upcoming slide. I'd like to focus our attention now down below with our operational request is a status quo request of $348,000. But my focus will be on our capital. I'm asking for $34,000 to be spent out of asset forfeiture. Again, as City Manager Domer indicated, to leverage on technology. And this is where we are going to utilize technology to decrease the amount of overtime that we are spending on. In assessing the department's overtime, we sought to reduce overtime expenses currently by halting all training that would create overtime by backfilling. Those measures have had an impact and will resume through June 30th. The department is testing a new product linked to our body-worn cameras, as I mentioned, designed to enhance report writing efficiency. The product utilizes AI while the camera is recording to generate a police report once the call is completed. Once the officer completes the call, the report is usually generated in about 10 seconds. The product also makes recommendations to ensure the officer did not forget anything such as Miranda statements or anything of evidentiary value. So it basically analyzes everything the officer asks or does, and it writes it down in a police report format. The department also analyzed the amount of overtime spent after an officer's shift in writing reports. The department averages roughly about 1,300 hours, which cost us in overtime about $117,000. If approved, the department seeks to reduce the amount of overtime for report writing by at least 50%, potentially saving the department about $65,000 in overtime, and which would also cover the cost of the program in itself. Again, this is a bit of a test and leverage on technology, but I have a challenge in recruiting police officers, so I got to figure out a way to leverage on technology to impact overtime. And this is a way we're looking at impacting overtime and reducing it by using a tool that is integrated in our body cams that we currently own. Here's the next slide that I mentioned. Some of the operational requests that are unfunded. There was a reduction in consulting services. One of the highlights here is that is a section in where it was reduced by $5,000. What does that mean? For Councilmember Crosby, that was taken out of our, we hire a consultant to do our backgrounds for new hires. Essentially, that reduces our backgrounds by 4 employees. So roughly, our goal is to get it done within 40 tries. This would have gave us roughly 44 to 45 tries to hire new people. We hope not to use it all, but it's there for a purpose. And then the smaller number is a reduction in materials and supplies. Okay, here are the items slashed in red and highlighted in red are items that are placed on hold. Items that we looked at carefully when tasked to say, can we do without, and how would that affect our operations? The very first one is self-explanatory. We look to improve the dirt and the ivy that's in front of the station to make it look more presentable. One of the thoughts that we had, we kind of threw it in there at the last minute. It was to have the Love Laverne Day do that. However, there's so much dealing with, and I forget all the acronyms, to make sure our water's running in the right direction. We have sufficient sprinklers to do so. That was scrubbed. So we sought to push that out another year, or perhaps next year for Love Laverne Day. That'll be a project that we can task, now having more time to address it and address all the legal requirements that the state poses on the city to have. I'll go on again. I'll continue with those that are lined out. In communications, we have a consulate radio. We have been in contact with. We are current members of ICI radio system. Having a new consulate will allow us to bring in the programs from LA RICS, which gives us the ability to communicate with our partners with the Sheriff's Department. Claremont has switched over to LA RICS, and if any of our police officers head east out of the county, those stations will also be programmed there. We are asking for one, which is below, which I'll speak to momentarily. But what I'm hoping on next year, 2025, we're anticipating some grant funding from the feds due to the fact that the Olympics are coming and the World Cup soccer is also coming. So we're looking at leveraging on some of those grant funds to potentially pay for this consulate radio for communication purposes. As I go down to the others that are struck out in red, is an indoor drone and a kinetic breaching tube. Both of those are items that would enhance our operations, both on the SWAT and our patrol, because they utilize both. The kinetic breaching tube essentially minimizes or reduces injuries. But again, it's something that we can push out or put on hold and perhaps bring it back in upcoming years. I'll now go through some of the other items that are here. Again, I gotta say thanks to the city manager and finance. We did some digging under every individual line item to find savings to ensure that we can purchase these this year. The first item there is the 3 metal detectors. Those metal detectors will be utilized for special events. I'll give you an example, the 4th of July. If approved, we are looking to have those readily available for the 4th of July and ensure and enhance the safety of all who come to enjoy the 4th of July. That to include graduations or any events large that would aid in our ability for people who come in and check them a lot more quicker. We would also, if the university or any of our other partners would like to utilize those, there would be a fee just like any other equipment while we do that. So we found that we purchased this year through savings. The second one is a micro computer for mapping locations, and that is another tool for efficiency. Basically, a map that shows where all our police cars are currently, and basically, as a call, a 911 call comes up, if there's a car nearby, regardless of the area they work, they would be sent to that call and reduce our response times. Again, we utilized savings to buy that now. The third is a software and a printer. Again, we're moving over from pen and paper into utilizing technology and providing people now with printed receipts for any expenses or any fees that they are bringing into the police department. And having an ability now to provide detailed reports utilizing software. Moving on to patrol services, you'll see 30,000 for 40mm patrol. For our patrol vehicles, if you recall last budget fiscal year, the city council approved that we could outfit half of our vehicles with these 40mm and removing the old bean bags. This will allow us to purchase the remaining half. Some of these tools, obviously, with elections coming, would help us aid in some of these tasks that we are with Area D. Again, we move that to measure LV to cover those funds. The second one there that's not highlighted is a consulate radio. That one would be placed in the watch commander's office. And again, the watch commander, either a lieutenant or a sergeant, if there is a pursuit of our officers that goes east into the county and they transition to a Alec Ricks radio, they would be able to continue to listen and make decisions based on the officer's actions, the suspect's actions, to either terminate the pursuit or make legal decisions or liability decisions that would limit liability. I think that's an important tool, and again, we use savings to purchase that. And then the very last two there, last year we also brought forward this topic for patrol rifles. The patrol rifles we currently have are over 20 years old, and we are seeking to replace those rifles and outfit each vehicle with these patrol rifles. And then the very last item there is a surveillance pole. As you are all aware, we are seeing an uptick in graffiti. And what we are trying to do is enhance our abilities to present a case to the district attorney. And we can do that by putting a camera up in these areas to record these actions being taken place. And that would enhance our case when we present not only the arrest and the evidence, but the video of it actually occurring. So this would enhance our investigation section. And again, it was purchased through savings in that. That is my last slide. In conclusion, we're striving to carefully balance our financial resources and operational needs as we aim to enhance public safety by investing in critical areas and maintaining transparency and accountability. Thank you for your attention and continued support. Your involvement and understanding are crucial to our success in ensuring the safety and well-being of our community.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions for Chief? Yes.
Just that we put thank goodness we got that matrix like a week ago or a couple weeks ago to put that in for us. Appreciate that. It's just like when we ask for fire, when we add employees because of matrix, just make sure that we come back with what costs they were afterwards and make sure that we're funding it the right way. And appreciate you looking at this year's budget to help pay for stuff that you were looking for next year to really get that in there.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Next up, Community Development. Mr. Shear.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I appreciate the opportunity to provide community development's budget for the fiscal year 24-25. I also like to thank Christy and her staff, specifically Isabella, for their help over the last few months on developing this budget, as well as with my own staff, Candace Bocock and Natalie Hyatt, on helping with our work on our budget. Just a recap of our last year's activity. We did do the first annexation of the city in over 30 years, and that was completed with LAFCO. We saw the completion of an 83,000 square foot industrial building on White Avenue, the start of construction over 100 homes throughout the city, and the review of a 360 unit mixed use project in the Old Town area. We also fully implemented our online building permit system. And we also, last year was the first year that we had reestablished the code enforcement activities in the community development department, hiring the city's first full-time code compliance officer. As a reminder, community development includes planning, building, housing, economic development, historic preservation, and now code enforcement. So for our objectives for next year, we look forward to finally adopting our multi-year general plan update efforts. We expect to have that towards the end of this summer, so relatively soon. We also expect to be processing, we just started underway processing a major expansion of Laverne Business Park on university-owned property down south of Arrow Highway. We also do expect an application for redevelopment of the former Lutheran High School site in the next year. We do see the ultimate completion of all those residential units that were started this last year to be completed by next year. The construction of a new 30,000 square foot industrial building on Palomares. And then working with the COG, the city manager's office, Public Works, continue to try to identify those fundings for that pedestrian bridge that's been underway. That kind of has a lot of ties back to the specific plan, the EIFD, the A-line extension, and Meg's going to talk a little bit more about that, those efforts. Lastly, in this next year, we hope to formally adopt a policy with code enforcement and make several modifications to our municipal code to give our code compliance officer the tools he needs to effectively and efficiently enforce the code in the city. So with this, our department remains adequately staffed at this time. When we had made a request for some internal promotional opportunities after working with the city manager more closely on this. We do support his request to not move forward with one of the positions, but do program for the promotion of another. So we do support that based on the current fiscal outlook for the entire city. Our department is relatively status quo in terms of the operational expenditures. Our biggest variable is building permit activity. From year to year, those can swing pretty widely. What we do is we take a conservative effort in our estimates on what projects might be built in the next fiscal year. A lot of times we miss the mark, but some other projects might happen that were never on our radar. And historically, we usually come in what sounds like a bad thing and over budget on expenditures, but that typically means our revenues are even higher. And so that's usually a good news. So we do try to budget conservatively for this, but it does make up the majority of our operational costs is with the building permit issuance. You can see that there's been some minor changes, reductions from the city manager. I'll go over those on the next slide. So pretty minor administrative changes, just some internal administrative issues. The one thing I will identify though specifically is the $6,500 reduction in economic development fund. That is specifically for the cities opting out of the San Gabriel Valley Economic Partnership in the next year. While evaluating the benefits of that membership, we've identified that we probably could achieve more with less by doing more in-house work and more specifically identifying the specific commercial vacancies in Laverne and trying to market those specifics to individual tenants that are expanding in the marketplace that Laverne fits their demographic needs and wants. So we think that we can do that with a little bit more staff focus that we probably wouldn't get out of that partnership. So this was one of the ways that we identified some cost reductions in our operations, but not to say that economic development isn't important. We're just going to try to make it more of a staff related effort versus the membership. And lastly, I'd just like to thank the council and the city manager for their support in my 25 years here with the city, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Director Scheer. Any questions? I really do like we've been talking about the economic development with a lot of our big businesses going out and some space. We're doing better than some, but as you know, that sales tax is what keeps us functioning. So if you do get into that situation, which sounds like you are after we, take away the San Gabriel Valley Economic Partnership, is to involve all of us, let us know what we're doing, let us know what we can do as council to reach out. Because we constantly get information from different cities, what they're doing, and people are looking for retail space, whether it be a food hall or something like that, that would fit nicely in some of our buildings we have. So let's work together as a team. I think it would be very good. And there's opportunities out there, and we need to champion on those as much as we can. So any other questions for Director Scheer? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Public Works. Hey. Huh? Big trucks. Director McWade.
Good evening, Honorable
evening.
Mayor and City Council members. I also would like to thank the finance team. I am a frequent flyer in Director Lopez's office, but also I want to recognize Ellie and everything that she did, not only for us, but every one of our team members. She was always there answering our questions, but helping us make sure it was done properly. Both Ken and Christy mentioned that we involved more people this year. And I would like to say and recognize the Public Works team did a phenomenal job. We have one of the most complex budgets with the most mix of funds, and they stepped up to the plate. So Lisa O'Brien was the lead on our Public Works operational budget. Chrissy Sanchez was lead on our CIP budget. And then the managers, I'd like to recognize Joe Vieira, our fleet manager, Colin Purdy, our acting maintenance manager, as well as Ryan Ciotti in the back, our acting utilities manager. So thank you, and thanks to everybody, because there were people behind them who were also part of this. So Public Works, I have magic. Public Works is responsible for maintaining infrastructure and also providing essential city services. And you can see the assets, some of the assets that we maintain, from the 97 miles of streets, 13 reservoirs, providing 27 million gallons of lovely drinking water every day, and fire protection. We also have 21 parks, 11,500 surveyed city trees. We have even more in the open space that we will get to someday. We also have 106 miles of sewer main and 130 miles of water main to maintain. So we this year have looked at our personnel requests and looked at our budget. And whenever you have an opening, you have an opportunity to look at how to structure a little bit differently. And so some of these requests are related to that. The Deputy Public Works Director will be a change from the Public Works Manager. And so that person will help oversee the environmental programs, but also it'll aid in future succession planning. I love it here and I want to be here for a long time, but ultimately the goal is to have somebody behind me ready to step in and take over. And another change that we're looking to do is a maintenance lead worker. So that essentially has been done during the mid-year process, but this is a formalization of this. And this is really reflective of the aging of our facilities and our infrastructure, predominantly our city buildings. We have been essentially borrowing from the streets maintenance crew to go and respond to the facilities maintenance requests. So the addition of the lead worker gives us a higher level of responsibility. And then the next one will actually backfill that streets maintenance worker that we've been pulling forward for that general fund operation. So the streets maintenance worker is proposed to be funded through streets funding, so it will not impact the general fund. And then the last one is a utility lead worker in order to ensure we remain competitive with outside market rates.
Is that why it's proposed as one extra request, one person, but at the top, you're not requesting one person because it's being funded off of the water?
I think that was a clerical error,
Okay.
and it should be 48
48
and 53.
at the top.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
So that was an oopsie on my part. The next is really the highlights for our budget. I mentioned, so these are the general fund operations that we have, city buildings, that's to maintain all but those that community services maintain. And I want to thank Yvonne and her team for their partnership in that. But essentially we maintain City Hall, fire station, as well as public safety buildings and restrooms, things like that. And if it's external on the buildings, we're essentially responsible for it. The next item is street maintenance. And Christy mentioned earlier that we have solid waste. So 3.6 million of that 5.2 is really reflective of the solid waste operation. It's a waste management contract, and it's essentially the revenues we received offset by the contract cost. So the largest increase, and let me turn to my notes, the largest increases relate to utility. and the contract costs that are affecting the operations, but also we, over the last several years, have increased some risk reduction measures. So we have increased slightly our street tree trimming. We've also added a precision concrete, a regular grid maintenance of the grinding operations to minimize trip and fall hazards. We also, in prior budgets, the risk reduction related to slope and open space clearance was done within the budgeted amount versus looking at what we truly needed to clear. So we've gone and we've established what we truly need to clear, and this budget is reflective of the almost $250,000 that's necessary to clear that on a regular basis. Another item in here is in the streets budget is traffic lighting, graffiti removal, and then just regular street. We also had an increase on the park side for water costs. Prior to this, there was an offset and it wasn't really reflected in general fund. So it's being reflected there now. The next item are the various funds that are separate from general fund. So as Christy mentioned, we have some enterprise funds. We also have the assessment district funds. And you'll see my highlight. It's really about fiscal sustainability on the side. So council has already authorized us to look at the assessment districts, which are essentially starting to be in a deficit position. Structurally, we're trying to correct those. So we have 2 assessment districts that are out to a vote of the people. We've held 2 community meetings. We have another community meeting tomorrow night and one on Wednesday. We're encouraging everybody to vote. And our goal and job is then to implement whatever service levels they choose to fund. So we'll be excited to see the vote outcome on June 17th. The next item is the water utility, sewer utility. Christy showed you the slides that we are essentially in an upside down position. We have not increased rates since 2019, although our costs, certainly MWD import water costs, have grown substantially in that time, as well as electricity, treatment chemicals, everything that goes into those utilities has increased. So we are underway right now with a cost of service study. We're close to finalizing the agreement language with the consultant. We'll bring forward the award once we do that. The next item are unfunded requests and operational items. So these are reductions that occurred. So the biggest reduction, there are quite a few on there. Some of them had to do with the ability, historically, we weren't quite spending. So when we went back and scrubbed it one more time, we found other reductions. So that's a part of it. But the largest reduction really relates to the parks and the contract maintenance in parks. I know that we've been tasked to rebid contracts, and we're doing that as on an ongoing basis. This one, though, we know from the Greenscape contract that occurred at Sports Park, costs went up 40 to 60%. I can't recall exactly what it was. So we know that when we rebid the citywide contract, the potential for it increasing significantly is great. So we are delaying that contract issuance or the RFP issuance till later on in the fiscal year. And then we can hopefully have the true costs in hand and then award by July 1st, but also know what they are in advance of the budget.
Contracts are in place. They're not changing.
They are not at this
Not
point,
changing at
and
all.
they've agreed to honor
And that's
the
what you're just
CPI.
waiting to see at a
Yes.
future date.
The other, so that's the largest one. Then another one is a slight reduction in the tree replacement. So we're going to reduce the number of vacant tree wells that we replant. So this is one of the larger costs in the unfunded request for capital outlay. I mentioned that the age of our buildings is getting up there. So typically what you can do is almost like a water master plan, a sewer master plan. You have a consultant come in and look at all of your systems, evaluate everything that's within the building, roofing, everything inside, everything external, and give you a game plan and a master plan for implementation to improve that infrastructure. We actually don't have the funding to do it at this moment, so it will be on hold until we can identify that funding. And then we had 2, and thanks to reduction in savings, we had the ability to move a controller system for the Fire Station 2 and Fire Station 3, and then also move bleacher replacements further up into this fiscal year. With that, I will turn it over.
Thank you, Director.
Unless
McQuaid.
there are
Is there any
questions.
questions? I think thank you.
Thank you very much.
We now have Community Services. Director Duran.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council. Tonight, present to you the Community Services Department budget not without the assistance of the finance department, like everybody else has said, but especially Jesus. He's our right-hand man. My staff and him go ask him questions daily. He hears all the ruckus in the back, all the complaints too, because his door is right there next to our offices. So it's nice to have him easily accessible. Tonight, the community services budget is pretty much status quo. A lot of the services that have increased are utilities, are just employee minimum wage increases, as well as renting of Lutheran High School. The city does not own its own gym, so we do have to rent that. Prior to Lutheran High School not becoming a high school, we used to have an agreement and they would use our facilities as softball fields. And in exchange, we would be able to utilize their gym. Now that is gone, so we do have to pay for that, which is part of this budget. But even with those increases, we were able to remain status quo. We do oversee 4 facilities, as mentioned in our budget message. And also some of the services that are not funded through special revenue are PLHA funding for the homelessness, which is able to provide us additional days and services for high acuity, as well as mobile crisis services here in the city. Our transportation services are Getabout or Foothill Transit through prop monies, specifically Prop C. Also our congregate meals through CDBG, Community Block Grant Fund. So a lot of the things that we do are able to be funded through other sources of revenue, whether through the state or through the Council of Governments, the SGV COG. One of the highlights and things that we're pretty excited about is last year we were able to secure an inclusion grant. And with that, we were able to provide services. And with that, we built a relationship with our regional center. And we've become the first city that's been approved as a vendor to provide special need aquatic swim lessons. So that is the first time a city has been able to do that. They're very happy with our services. So now families here in the San Gabriel Valley are able to register for private swim lessons. And in turn, the San Gabriel Valley, if approved, will be able to pay for those private swim lessons. So it's one of the things that came out of the grant, and now we became a vendor. I need this control.
Advertise through the regional center?
It's going to be advertised through the regional center. We meet monthly with all the cities with regional center, and it will be announced as well. It was a process. We were able to complete the paperwork and it's in final stages. So I actually meet with them this week about another event that they want to partner with us on. A side note, a chalk festival for special needs here coming next year, but we'll be speaking more on that, which is pretty exciting. So personnel, for the most part, is status quo. We did ask for a part-time administrative clerk to be promoted to full-time. This position, in essence, would be funded 65% through prop monies, but with everything going on with the budget and with City Manager Domer's recommendation, we've kind of just held that back. It's something that is eventually necessary for our department. We have 1 full-time administrative clerk 2 at this moment, and 2 part-timers. Our offices are very busy with passport services, rental services, and park rentals, amongst other things. And we've probably increased by 30% in the last couple of years. So that is something that will be needed, but maybe we can come back mid-year to council and request that. But in the meantime, as the employee is needed, we will be approving her overage. It's not overtime, but additional time just to cover the front desk. But that is the one request that we did make, but I wanted to bring to council attention that is 65% paid for through prop monies. So it's not all completely general fund monies. Some of the expenses here, like I stated before, are pretty much status quo. We continue to seek grant opportunities, much like the Aquatic Center with Holden's money, the Niagara money, through Measure A monies. Meg will talk a little bit more about some of the playground that we're able to take off a capital improvement through park development and instead pay with Measure A. So our department's continually seeking additional revenue that we can offset instead of using general fund money. So for the most part, that's what it is. And the next slide, we were able to reduce in certain areas to the total of $5,000 to mitigate some of these budgetary constraints. We'll live without, but for the most part, status quo for Community Services Department. And I'm here if council has any questions.
I know that you're constantly reviewing for cost of services as to what people are paying to make sure we're covering our internal costs, just like every other department. So, and I know you've been working on that.
Yes, and that we have increased for our facility rentals and more recently our park shelter rentals. There is now a resident, non-resident fee. So we are looking to do that. And we just transferred credit card user fees that the city used to pay upwards to $20,000 out of my budget now goes on to the resident effective as of last month. So
Thank
we're
goodness.
looking at, I'm
Finally.
trying to be creative about
Finally.
things and looking at things. So
Everybody does that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just cost of doing business. You want to use a credit card, it's going to cost you 3%
correct. So
or whatever.
I appreciate Jesus helped me a lot with that in transitioning to the credit card system. So thank you, Jesus, for that. Without him, he made it just much easier, much smoother, without having to take too much time from our staff. He kind of took the lead on that. So
Thank you, Director Duran.
I actually think I was the first one to pay that fee on a passport.
he
I think
did.
it was 45 cents.
Was that you screaming in City Hall that day?
Yes.
The
Yeah.
Resident.
45 cents? They're on it. Oh, no, it was the total cost.
That was employee discount?
Yes. And right now, resident, resident fees are only for park shelter rentals. Eventually it'll be for facility rentals. But those revenues are actually looking very good in terms of facility rentals. People are very happy with our facilities and we do our best to maintain them.
Excellent.
Your
you very much.
facilities are clean, they're amazing, and I really appreciate you looking after the folks that are here, that are residents, and being able to use that. And the non-residents that want to visit our city, well, hey, welcome. to
Especially when you have functions at the community center where the city manager and myself are cleaning up trash afterwards when we're feeding everybody.
Did a good
But
job.
someone left. We didn't know where he went.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not to mention anybody.
Thank
Ran
you.
away with dessert.
Director
I did, and 2 hamburgers. Thank you.
Capital outlay and special programs. Christie.
Each of the departments did include their capital outlay within their budgets, but this is a summary. All of these items have either been put on hold or have been moved to a different fiscal year. So we have moved quite a few into this fiscal year, utilizing savings that we are anticipating, or they have been moved to a different fund. So all of these, the ones with the 2 stars are on hold, but everything else will be purchased. The next one is a summary. These are all non-general funds. So you can see the Measure LV has $143,000 as discussed, which includes the staff recommended changes from the Measure LV committee, which is shifting the hose for the fire department and the 40 millimeter launchers and the pole surveillance into Measure LV, and removing a shed that fire believes that they can put on hold, and the jail interface that we are going to be purchasing this year that will be beneficial for the police department. The other items are all in other funds, including, as Sam mentioned, the AI for Axon, which is our body cameras, along with other items. The last part is our special programs. These are all the items that are not general fund, but do have either community development block grant or asset forfeiture. This is also where we are identifying our fiduciary items that we include, which is over $5 million for HIDA. And we have Measure M, which funds, that's the position that Meg talked about. Measure W, which is water, Prop A and C, which are transportation. This includes all of those other funds. And with that, if you have no questions, I will bring Meg up for CIP.
Thank you, Christy. Hello again.
Hello again. This time I want to thank all the other directors and all the other departments for trying to figure out and creatively look for ways within their own departments to fund some of these things. So I appreciate that cooperation and also that constant pursuit of grants. So the 5-year CIP presented for you tonight is really related to $13 million of additional or of new funding requests. There's proposed budgeted projects, including carryover. So that's 26.84 million. Doesn't include the two annual sidewalk and PMP program, but it includes everything else. Then in terms of the 5-year CIP total, so from carryover projects to new funding requests, it's $111 million. We obviously do not have all the funding for that, but it is future needs. And the last thing is 77 million is really the differential between the current year requests, carryover, and then future requests. So this is just who is essentially funding these requests. You can see the highest one is really the water CIP. A big portion of that is the Plateau Summit, but also some system improvements that we need. And then the vast majority of them are transportation funding, as well as some prop funding. The next item is CIP funding requests, and this is basically showing the transportation funding. Something that I love about Verne is the roads, and we do want to keep those investments going. And so this is the source of funding. It's restricted predominantly to that. Prop A and Prop C are the most restrictive. Right now, we're working with Metro to see if we can use PVTA's routes to broaden our use of those funds, or at least Prop C. But this is how we're actually going to be spending the money this year on the roads. So the next item is really the current existing projects that have additional funding appropriation requests. And so the first one is the annual sidewalk rehabilitation. We just on an ongoing basis are reinvesting 200,000. Annual pavement management program, we use the PMP by our outside consultant to guide how we're going to invest in those streets. The EV charging station is really funded from AQMD, but it's to add the charging to our actual city yard. The video management system formerly was known as the mesh network system, but it's really for cameras and security. The reason why there's additional water and sewer funding is because we have facilities that also need those cameras installed. The large majority of that project is funded by a grant. The Las Flores Park tennis court, this is just to finish out the project costs, but also to reserve a small amount should we need soundproofing. We're hoping we do not. We installed new fencing and some new screening. And so far we have, right, Director Duran, it's being used a lot and so far. So hopefully it'll stay that way. So we might be able to. It is. The next is the B Street. You have seen B Street before, but this is, you'll see a companion item on tonight's agenda. It's moving, but it's not awarded yet. But this is to use SB1 funding so that we timely use that funding, and it's at a single project. Another one is AMI meter conversion. It's from the water, and this is to basically have a communication loop directly from your meter to our billing system. But also ultimately the goal is it's a 5-year plan. If we get grant funding, it'll move up much faster. But ultimately the goal is to enable residents themselves to have that ongoing. You can look at it anytime you want. They have software systems where you can monitor and it feeds back to you. That's our goal to get there. Sorry, sir. Well, he might notice. He might notice. The other two are the Live Oak Hydro Station generator so that we can obviously provide for water in emergency situations. And then the Plateau Summit, we're very close to actually bidding that. They're doing the final review of it and it should be out to bid in the next several weeks with the award hopefully coming back to you at the August meeting. The next is the new project list. So what do we want? There's a City Hall roof project. I'll go through them very quickly. Fire Station 2 roof, Fire Station 3 alarm system, the furniture replacement for PD records and detectives, Veterans Hall's flooring, the Public Safety Emergency Operations Center. And as you can see, the funding sources of these are a lot of times grant funded or other special revenue. Public parking lot improvement, signage and striping work, and the Hayes King paving, you'll see asterisks. We're actually awarding those projects tonight, so these dollar amounts will change a little bit. Oak Mesa Playground equipment, working with community services, we had very limited funds, so this was one of the ones highest priority just because of the usage and what needs to happen there. Yvonne mentioned Measure A. So we are able to utilize that Measure A funding that was identified by the community services team to do a park master plan and really guide our future investments. Sewer line rehab, 150,000. Arrow Highway is one of the next largest projects that's been identified on our PMP. We anticipate it'll be about a $6 million project, and this is us starting to put away funding for it. Ramona Avenue, pressure reducing valve and water system rehab. Those are just improvements for the water system. The next is really, it's a summary list. I'm just going to highlight, basically, Eric mentioned the pedestrian bridge. And as you know, thanks to the mayor for some phone calls in support of it, but SCAG has, and I'd like to recognize Andrea Blockinger because she helped us package 2 other grants that we were not successful on. It was ready to go when COG said we may have a funding source. So we, at this moment, I don't know if I'm knocking on wood or shouldn't be, June 6th, we're recommended for $19 million of funding for that bridge. So we still have a ways to go, but we're getting much closer to that kind of end goal. So if anybody has questions on that or wants to talk about projects later too, I'm available.
Thank you, Meg. Appreciate that. Any questions for Director McQuaid? I want to say that we had, thank you very much, but I want to say that walking the dogs in the morning, is it Tyke, one of your water?
Yes.
I tell you, not just me, but friendly with everyone, and he's a dog-friendly person. So everybody that he meets, he's very cordial, very professional. I just want to let you know that
We will share that. Thank
it's
you.
just going along with our services that we all get through the city. Just one more individual among the hundreds of employees that we have. They're so cordial to everybody and very nice to all the residents.
Yes, and can I just say, I've worked at several other agencies. It's our team members that are phenomenal. It's the community, but it's also council. Just want to say thank you for that collaborative effort, the department heads, that collaborative effort. Very lucky to work here. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Mayor, members of council, just to recap everything. So we're proposing a $48.9 million general fund budget that is balanced. It is balanced using some of the unassigned fund balances that Christy talked about earlier. It reflects the needs to balance, personnel costs with the ongoing revenues and to start thinking ahead over a 10-year period. Again, we're entering a time you're going to be hearing from a lot of other cities about their deficits and what they're doing. I know my own city last night, actually, I had a public opinion call about a 1% sales tax in the city of Orange. And I answered some of the questions and all that stuff, but they're looking at a $19 million structural deficit with a lot of issues going on there. So, but Measure LV, the expenditures need to be aligned with the revenues coming in. It's not a unlimited resource. It's one of those that it needs to be balanced with the revenue stream. We do have those sources, the revenues that were put aside in the very beginning. We have to use those judiciously to make sure that we are not, bleeding that fund into anything other than just a stable, sustainable fund over the years that it's there. And then maintenance and CIP, as Director McMade was saying, have to be, continue to be emphasized. It is so important to keep your community good looking, the streets, the sidewalks, the parks. That is really what a community is all about, is, when people drive through and they say, wow, this is a great place. That's why people live here. They continue to live here. Though it'd be nice if they exchange homes every once in a while and sell and buy another one in Laverne. And then, really what we're going into is, again, budget maintenance year round. We're going to be looking at this. Christy's team is going to be looking at this, all the departments and their staff, because we've broadened the understanding of the budget, and we'll continue to do that. And we're going to continue to do that with the public too, to make sure that they have the education and the information they need to know as to their taxpayers' funds are doing a good thing. And I hope that they see that in the staff, in the improvements, in the maintenance, but they'll have that also in information as to understanding how the sources are used and where funds are going. So with any questions or any direction, we do look forward to bringing this back on June 17th for an adoption. So, at this time, you can give us direction, or over the next week, let Christy or I know what some of your thoughts are.
Council, quick questions or comments?
So first, I just wanted to say thank you to Christy and her team and all the department heads and all the employees that collaborated on this to get this in front of us. I know the lovely one that I got to review, lots of changes were made, which I appreciate. And I know that was not an easy thing to have happen. But I don't want to make light of the fact that we are going into a very difficult period. And while this proposed budget is balanced, which again, I very much appreciate, you figured out where we could have cost savings and make amends. But we're going into a period of time where we're going to have to continually think about that. And so I don't want the burden to be just on, Christy and her staff, but I really want the department heads to really educate their successors, their colleagues, their networks about what every little thing means, right? Because as I said to Christy, I could advocate for every request that was made in this budget if you asked me to, and not just because I'm a lawyer, but I could advocate for every single one. But we can't think about it independently. We are a cohesive community, and you can't have one without the other. We can have the nicest fleets, we can have the nicest trucks, but if we don't have the roads for them to be able to drive on, it really doesn't mean anything. So, I encourage you to continue to collaborate and work together to figure these things out, so that we can make this work for the long run, because I don't think it's going to get necessarily any easier. So we've just got to get smarter about it. So I appreciate all the hard work you put into this. I know this amendment, this revised version came through today, and I know that's because of all the combined efforts from all of you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Dow. Councilmember Crosby.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, the work by all the departments, everyone looks that they've worked hard to make sure that we have a balanced budget. I know I want to thank Christy and her staff, but also the department heads and all the departments really working hard. As I got to meet with Christy last week, it wasn't balanced at that time, and really appreciate that. But I do have some concerns. The cost of PERS, CalPERS concerns on the out years, and the enterprise fund on the out years. Those are two things that we need to really look at. And just like Councilmember Lau said, when we have a really tight budget, that means we're on the razor's edge either side. And so it's that constantly looking at it. It's always great. But one thing that we still maintain, which has been maintained since I've been on council, is our reserves. Our reserves in 2020 were at 29%, and they are this last year at 29%. We need to make sure and maintain that, because rainy day things do happen, and we have to make sure that we have funds to be able to cover that if something does happen. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Crosby. Councilmember Cash.
Thank you, Mayor. My colleague said it best. As far as what we need to do moving forward, again, I appreciate our staff, who are just amazing, being able to bring in a balanced budget, in my opinion. And my colleague just say correct. We can have these great vehicles, but without good roads on them, they're just going to keep breaking down. I love to see the fact that our public safety is maintaining that safety for our community. Very important for me. As a public safety professional as I am over the years, our safety is paramount in my eyes. And thank you so much for our fire and for our police, for always being out there spearheading the way for safety. And of course, our public works. Thank you once again for keeping our roads safe in our communities, and our community service folks who are just doing an amazing job keeping our parks clean, and our folks there happy to use these facilities. So I look forward to next time we meet, and I appreciate everything you guys do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Cash. Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
I just want to say I appreciate each of the department heads with the hard work trying to balance this budget. There's nothing easy about that when funds are tight. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Just echo everyone's thoughts, and I do appreciate it, Christy, and all the departments. This wasn't easy, and been on council since 2015. We're finally getting to the point where we may not like what we see, but the point is we know what we're looking at now. And I think it's important, especially all of our funds, which gives us the purview and how we're making sure that those funds are being properly dispersed and properly received. And we do have an aging infrastructure. We've kind of been kicking the can down the road, like our maintenance districts, which we probably should have been addressing them before. We have new management now, and that's where we're all working together as a team. And that teamwork is extremely important. We are in a cloudy area coming in the next few years. There's no question about it. We've got a budget that we really don't know what is in the state of California. Not only that, one of the other things that's one of the big funds that's going to be changing here is your gas tax. That's going to be changing, and it's going to affect how we get funds because of the electrification and electric vehicles. They'll probably have a resolve, but they haven't figured it out yet. But I do truly appreciate everything you guys have done. One of the things that I want to make sure, though, is as an employer and working a lot of night shifts, which most of my guys do, but that's all they do is work night shifts. Our overtime situation needs to be monitored closely. Problem with overtime is it's a great thing. You get extra money and I know you're not paying benefits on it, but the burnout ratio of our employees is tremendous. And we need to very, very much watch that. It's very critical. We have to watch that tremendously because you have workers' comp issues, you have burnout factors, and you just have problems. And I think we need to, and that's one of those costs that you can't put your grips on, you put your hands around because it comes out. And I understand how we're doing it, but I think each department is working on that now to make that to where if there's a little bit overtime, that's great, but we need to really make sure that we watch that closely because I worry more about the employees, also about the services that we give to our community and make sure that everybody's fresh, make sure they're making good decisions. We are a special city because of that. So, and we are very blessed to have extremely good employees. And I know that all of our residences expect good services. So if that changes, we do have reserves. We don't want to use those up, but I appreciate Mr. Domer, you working with the finance department and all the other departments for making this budget a good budget that we can move forward with. And I know we have challenges coming forward, but with that, you need a recommendation, Mr. Domer? Do you need a vote or just a recommendation? Just going to move forward. We're going to do that and take a yes. We're going to go ahead and thank you again, staff. We couldn't do it without you guys. Thank you very much. We're going to recess this meeting at 6:28 p.m. We'll call our other meeting here shortly. We're going to take a break.
Yeah.
Just a minute break.